Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Riffhard podcast. I'm stoked about this episode because it's with an old friend of mine going back like 20 years. We've got Mr. Ryan Knight from the Black Dahlia Murder. As many of you might know, he left the band for a while, came back, and they are putting out their first record with him back in the lineup. It's called Servitude, and it's out on September 27th, 2024. There's already a few singles out, Aftermath and Mammoth's Hand, and, you know, in true Black Dahlia fashion, just rules. It's just great stuff. They never put out anything but great stuff. So, you know, if you're a fan, it'll be right up your alley. And this is a great conversation. We catch up on old times, talk about developing speed on guitar, talk about writing solos, just talk about all kinds of really, really cool stuff. I'll stop this intro because this is actually a pretty long episode. Let's get into it. Well, Mr. Ryan Knight.
Here
Dude,
we are.
What I feel like the last time I saw you was in 2013 at a bar, right around when I was in Detroit for recording Everblack drums.
Yes. That sounds about right.
Or did you come to Florida to track solos with Mark? I don't remember.
Yeah, I was down there too. So it could have, yeah, I was definitely down there.
Maybe I saw you. But the last time that like we hung out, like, because we hung out at that bar.
Yeah.
Was that bar like the night before I left or something?
Right. I'm trying to like, pull, yeah.
It was near Brian's house.
Yeah. Okay. That makes,
It was
yeah.
near Brian's house. Drums had just been finished.
Right.
That's all I remember.
Okay. It was definitely one of two places then. So, but yeah, that I vaguely remember that. Yes.
Yeah, dude.
Been to many bars since then.
It's been forever. I have a question. I've been like wanting to ask you for some reason. I just never asked you. But I've been wondering this since like 2006.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you think back to recording the Knife Trade, which by the way, still in my opinion was like one of the sickest local things I've ever heard. For people who don't know, you should look up the Knife Trade. So I remember recording that, and I was playing in Arsis briefly at the time, and I remember telling James Malone that I'm in it. The only reason I'd ever quit is if like Doth gets signed to Roadrunner, but that's never going to happen. So don't worry. Cause he was like thinking that I was going to ditch or something. I was like, that's the only thing that could happen that would make me ditch. But like, that's so unrealistic. Don't even worry about it. And then that's what happened.
All right.
So he was like, do you know anybody? And I told him to talk to you. Like you were the only person that came to mind. And I remember, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I've really always been wondering about this. You had reservations about what it would do to the Knife Trade. Yes. And I've had this conversation with people, not about you, but like this particular topic where somebody asks me, do you know someone who could take this gig, whether it's like an engineering gig or a spot in a band? And lots of times they turn it down because they're banned from back home. They might lose the friends in it, or in other cases, I think they were just scared of opportunity or something.
Right.
But you were very hesitant. And I feel like that was one of those, that was like a life-changing decision for you to take that, because that obviously led to this and everything. So what I'm wondering is, what were you hesitant about, and why did you finally decide to say yes to trying the Arsis thing?
Man, that's a good question.
Dude,
And yeah, that was
because it blew my mind. Because to me, it would have been like, fuck yeah.
right. Man, wow, that was 18 years ago. Realizing that now.
It's crazy, right?
I mean, I could be wrong about this, but I originally remember being like, yeah, I definitely didn't say yes right away, because there was because I remember like they did like some tour. I want to say it was in like September of that year, and I forget honestly what I originally told James. I think I may have even told him like, look, I'm I'm down, but I'm not down right now. But here's what I do remember though. I do remember like being in Athens, Georgia at the time where I was living, and I was like walking down the street one night, and I don't remember if I may have been like partially drunk or I don't even remember, but so long ago. But I remember like calling him and being like, "Look, I'll do it. If it's still open, I'll do it." And then I ended up doing like the next tour, like a few weeks later. But I don't remember why. Um, I think that maybe we may have had like some studio time booked or something, which is possible. And the reason why I'm saying that is because we actually did go to North Carolina and track some drums with Jamie King at the
In Knife
time.
Trade.
Yes.
Hmm.
I tracked a bunch of drums and basically nothing ever happened with those. For I don't know. That's like a whole nother story, but yeah, but that's the only thing I can really think of at the time. Because at the time, like, I mean, I was definitely not under any other obligation, I was like 23 years old or something. So I'm not
Yeah,
really sure.
I just found it. I found it really interesting. All right. Before we get back to this episode, I want to take a minute to talk about Riffhard, riffhard.com, not the Riffhard podcast, because this podcast is actually tied to our online school, Riffhard. And if you're new here, it's the world's best online school for modern metal guitarists. We've got hundreds of lessons from guitar players such as Javier Reyes, Jason Richardson, Wes Hawk, Dan Sugarman, Miles Dimitri Baker. Man, I could just keep on going on. Aaron Marshall from Intervals, Mike Stringer of Spirit Box. I'm reading now because I don't want to leave anybody off. Dean Lamb of Arcspire. It just goes on and on. It's like all the best of the best. And you get tons more than just lessons with them. You get instant access when you join, but there's also all kinds of challenges. Like once a month, we do something like 10-day down picking challenge or a 10-day tremolo picking challenge or a 10-day alternate picking challenge where we really guide you through the lessons and make sure that everybody is getting better. We're not just giving you these videos and sending you out into the wilderness to fend for yourself. We are right there with you. We also do 6 songwriting challenges. Like we have a monthly one called King of the Riff, where we give you a brief, like write a Spartan war anthem or write a technical death metal song with like some criteria. And there's prizes that include guitars and cables and all kinds of cool gear. And we also have private Facebook and Discord communities of like mind and supportive people, no assholes. That's really, really important to include. Now, with Riffhard, you also get a subscription to Nail the Mix. They live under the same site. So in Nail the Mix, you get to learn how to mix metal. You also get access to Buster Otoholm's Beginner's Guide to Recording Metal. So if you're just playing guitar and trying to record yourself, you have a band and you want to make demos for your band members, or you want to make your own demos, but you just can't get them to sound anything but garbage, or you just can't get past the starting gate, it's too complicated, we've got you covered. Buster Otoholm will show you how to do it. And also, if you want to take it further and actually learn how to mix, there's no place better than Nail the Mix over at URM Academy, and that's all included with Riffhard subscription. All right, so if that sounds interesting, you want to check it out, go to riffhard.com. I'll see you there, and let's get back into this episode. For people who don't know, like back in those days, Doth was unsigned. Knife Trade was Ryan's unsigned band. We were just dudes in like local bands from that time. And then Ryan's band came to record some stuff with me, like in Atlanta. And we kind of just made friends there. But it was just kind of this, I would call it the outsider circles of local bands. None of us were like in the cool local bands in like in the in the Mastodon little 5 Point scene. Yeah. None of us were like in the cool kids club, but but for like the way that I have always thought, like this is just how I'm wired, is I'm like an opportunity hound. Like,
Yeah.
like it's like I see it, and then I see the path, and to me, it's like the clouds part or something, and it's like I see the
Yeah.
road, and I have to go, and it's like this compulsion.
Yeah.
So, and I've never had the maybe yes, maybe not. Even when like things went bad in Florida, and I decided to start URM, instead of continuing to produce records at all. And I was making a good living producing records.
Right.
But I felt like if I don't start URM, there's always going to be something else that comes up.
Right.
Like, yeah, that record's cool. I'll just put off starting it till after that. And then, there'll be like, oh, well, this other record in 2 months is cool.
Right.
Never actually put the time into doing it. So it's like, I have to. And so it's always been interesting to me when someone who has actually made a name for themselves and made it work was pensive about the situation. So were you like, was there any part of you that was like afraid of taking the opportunity?
I don't think so, but the one thing that I will say kind of like about my character that, I mean, some people may not know is like, I'm just a little bit like, I don't like being locked into anything. It's like, I don't want to say that like I have a fear of like commitment, because like, obviously there's things I've committed to that, fine with, but like, I think I'm just I'm like very hesitant to like commit to anything, and almost to, even to like a fault, because like it could be like the greatest thing in the world and I'm still like kind of like
Something about it.
yeah, like I really like my freedom. And as I've gotten older, there's like certain things that I'm like, okay, your perspective changes on things, but like I'm definitely like a person that like, yeah, like it's depending on, like it's real hard to sell me on anything. I guess is what I'm saying.
Remember.
Yeah.
I
But
remember.
the one thing I wanted to say too is like, though, looking back, in hindsight on it now, those two Knife Trade tracks that we did with you, honestly, if I could go back, we should have just like, because I think we had a bunch of songs, we had like a whole
They were
record.
sick.
Yeah, I wish we would have just done the whole thing then, because at least I would have like a record of it, or rather than have like two tracks. And I'm like, yeah, I think those still, there's things that could have been better, but I'm still like, I'm like, yeah, that's cool for the time. Like, pretty happy with that. So, but anyway,
I always wondered, like, why not do both? Like, I at least in my mind, it was always like, why ditch this? It's like, dude, I recorded a lot of local bands in those days, and that was probably the best one by far out of all of the bands I recorded in those days. The only stuff that was like on par were signed bands I worked with at that time, like Arsis or something, or Misery Index. But like the Knife Trade was right up there with everything. So I was surprised. You didn't do more, but I guess, you always could.
Pretty much what happened was, I'll tell you this much though, since this is like kind of like exactly what we're talking about. Pretty much what happened was, though, a lot of those songs, like I was gonna keep doing it, right? But it's like after we tracked the drums and that whole like the thing that happened with that, like after that became sort of like problematic, I had already, started doing the Arsis thing. And then, obviously soon after the Black Dahlia thing. And I was just like, well, fuck, I'm already doing things now. But basically what happened is a lot of those songs, or not necessarily the whole songs, but like a lot of those riffs and a lot of that stuff ended up in Black Dahlia stuff.
I remember when you were in long enough that Brian started to take your ideas and you sent me some of the demos. I feel like the last song on Everblack was a U track.
Yeah.
I forget what it's called. Like, I'm terrible with song names, but I love the chords in that one. I'm going to look it up just so people.
I think it's if it's Everblack, I think it's Map of Scars. I
think so. I think it's Map of Scars. I'm looking it up right now. of course, you know your own songs, band. Yep. So, it's like, of course, you know the names of the songs in your band,
I know
but
some of it. Like, well, the end track's easy to remember. Well, for me
yeah,
anyway.
fair.
Everything in
Well,
between, though.
I remember that I know that you had started writing before that, but I know that like writing in Black Dahlia, I don't know how it works now, but like at the time, you know, Brian was not eager to just let people come in and write because it had a very, you know, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And little by little, you started to be able to write, and your songs are great. And then I remember, this is what I remember about Everblack and about Map of Scars. And the demo was that you were listening to the Adele song from the Bond movie, Skyfall.
Yeah.
And like I feel like we went down a rabbit hole about how fucking incredible that song was.
Yeah.
And then you wrote Map of Scars. If correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you wrote the chord progression in Map of Scars kind of inspired by Skyfall.
Yeah, it was probably yeah, I remember when that song was out and I loved it. But I will say this too. I'm like a big John Barry fan. Like I love
Mm-hmm.
basically like almost anything John Barry does, but especially obviously like, the Bond stuff
It's
and
so good.
but yeah, so yeah, it's totally yeah, that chorus part or whatever is totally inspired by that whole yeah, you're that's it. Yeah. Either that song or just some John Barry, yeah.
Dude, I don't remember much else.
Yeah.
My memory is terrible for certain things, but I remember anything to do with like a Bond theme or a Bond score, or the way that someone takes that and works it into metal is something that sticks for me. So I want to go back to something you said about not liking to be committed. So
hmm
with you coming back to the band, did that feel like a sense of duty or something?
Um Not really. It's like kind of like the case where when I left the band, I didn't really want to leave. But that was just like when I left the band, there wasn't like one reason I left the band. I just got like a little like, my daughter was smaller at the
Yeah.
time and I was just kind of like burnt out on touring. I was burnt out. I was honestly just kind of burnt out on metal. So it was like not one, it was had nothing to do with the guys or
Yeah.
anything like that. I was just
Nothing happened.
no, no.
Yeah.
And I was just like super burned out and so and then I left the band. I was out for like 6 years. And obviously in 6 years, like, I had a lot of time to explore other music and, just do whatever. But yeah, so like unfortunately, when everything that transpired, you know, happened and Brian called me up. Yeah, I was like, and I had like kept in contact with Brian over the
Yeah.
years. It wasn't like we were never talking or anything. But I don't know. I just felt like I was in a good place, and honestly, it kind of naturally worked out because the band is from here in Detroit Metro. My wife is from here in Detroit Metro, and at the time we were living in Nashville, and we were about to have my son, and we didn't have any family in Nashville, and all my wife's family's up here, so we discussed moving up here anyway. So like, I was just like, yeah, we'll just move to Michigan then. We've already been thinking about it. So like a year later, we moved to Michigan. It was all, and it's like I already have a job.
Yeah.
And
May as
and
well.
and yeah, and it's like by that point, yeah, I was ready to like pretty much, you know, play guitar for a living again for sure.
So during your time off, you were exploring other music, but
Mhm.
was it I need to not have this be the center of my life kind of thing?
Yeah, pretty kind of. Yeah. It was, I kind of just got into a point where I just wanted to do, of course, I'm always playing guitar. I just wanted to like basically just practice a lot. Wanted to like study other music, wanted to like work on some solo stuff, and then just basically live like a normal guy life for a minute, you know?
How was that?
Um,
I'm kind of jealous.
uh,
I think you didn't even answer the question, but
yeah, well,
just
the
the idea. I'm kind of jealous of the idea.
the first few years were kind of rough. The adjustment of like coming off the road, was kind of like hitting a brick wall going like 1,000 miles an hour,
Yeah.
when you're so used to, how it is doing stuff all the time. So the first like few years were definitely an adjustment, like the first like 2, 3 years. Um, but then after that, I kind of got like acclimated to it. And then when we were living in Nashville, I started doing I got into doing like IT work for Vanderbilt University there. And I actually really liked that. I mean, I've always kind of liked the IT stuff, forever. But so yeah, I had kind of like fully sort of transitioned to like, just almost like another career. I mean, of course, I was always playing guitar, but yeah.
So that transition from touring to normal life,
Mhm.
when I moved to Florida, even though that's not quote unquote normal life, compared to the band being the main thing,
Right.
that was that was very hard psychologically. Even though I was still working in music,
Hmm.
it was very hard psychologically to downshift gears, I guess, because I think when you're in the band tour mentality, uh, especially touring,
Hmm.
you're like in this fight or flight mode a lot,
Yeah.
and I mean, it's no secret to you that we didn't get along in those days, the band. So it wasn't like the best. It wasn't the best situation for anybody. It was a very, very tense situation. So, like, kind of like trying to make it work through that tension, and then just done. Now you're in one place. Now you have a job, kind of thing. It
Yeah.
was definitely a very, very, very strange thing. I think took a
Yeah.
few years to get adjusted.
Yeah, I think like very much so. Like I think like when you work in the music world, especially like if you're a like, producer or you're like a full-time for, touring musician, any of those things. I feel like it's like you almost like you live like an interesting bubble. I feel like it's not, because most of the time the people you're interacting with are other musicians.
Yeah,
Musicians
it's
are
not the real
fucking,
world.
yeah, musicians are fucking weird people. We're all
So,
weird people to a degree, I feel
oh
like. And,
yeah,
and you're like, it really, like, I remember Max, our bass player, when before he came back into Black Dahlia, I remember he was making this. He's like, man, he's like that. Yeah, he's like the real world. He's like, he's like, we're the life we live. This is just fucking weird. We're just weirdos, man. Like the way we interact with
yes,
each other. And at the time, I kind of like didn't know what he was talking about. And then I was like, oh, this is what he's talking about. Because I don't, yeah, it's just crazy. And also, like, I think what happens is like the band or whatever it is that you do, it becomes like so part of your like identity,
yes.
that you almost forget like, oh, I'm a human. I'm like, whatever. I'm like a father or I'm this or that. You just forget like, oh yeah, I'm not just this,
I'm not my work.
Right. Exactly. So,
Yeah, dude. Even in the not real world of the studio, just going from the band to the studio in
mhm.
Florida was a huge culture like mind fuck. But the real world outside of music, the when I first realized how crazy and weird the music world is was when, like, I remember exactly when I realized how wild music is was there was this one summer, I think '07, where like we did like Summer Slaughter straight into this Fetus tour, straight into Ozfest, like 90 days straight. And you know how it is. The longer you're out there, the more savage you become. And the more that you're, the way that you communicate with each other and the things that are okay to say and just
Yeah.
the behavior is it just becomes more and more a part of you. And then immediately, like the week after I got back, I went to a high school reunion, 10-year high school reunion. And so I'm sitting at this like bar with all these people they were just talking about having gotten married and where they're sending their kids to school and the house they just bought and this job at a firm. Like, oh man, I can't tell you what I've been doing. This, you can't know about my life. It was so clear to me that we are not at all on the same path whatsoever. And when they asked me questions, I started to talk still in tour mode. I saw their faces just start to change, not for the better. It was like, all right, we're not we're not living in the same world
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah. Yeah,
Need to
man.
calm the fuck down.
Yeah. Sometimes like people ask me, um, especially now that my son's born, and I have like another son on the way, and like people are like, "Do you think your kids are gonna play guitar or get the music?" I was like, "I fucking hope not." Because I'm like, man, I hope they become like doctors or lawyers or something. Honestly, I'm just like, I don't know. I'm not gonna like, if they want to play or whatever, cool. But like, I would never be like, yeah, go down this path, because it's even when you're successful. I mean, yeah, it's like a wild world. It is, you know.
That's actually a question I've asked lots of guests. You've done well, like by to an outsider, and this is applicable to anyone I have on the podcast. Is like you've done well. You've accomplished dreams that lots of other people will only ever dream about, and you're very accomplished at what you do. Like, whether I'm talking to a mixer or to you on guitar, or I'm always talking to people that are very accomplished, and I'm always wondering, okay, you made it work. Somehow you made it work and have kept it up. If you have kids one day, or once your kids now grow up, they say they want to do what you do. Are you going to encourage them or discourage them, knowing what you know about
Right.
what it takes?
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, yeah, I mean, man, it's just like, I mean, yeah, if like any of my kids wanted to play music, I mean, of course I'd be like stoked about it, but I honestly don't know that I mean, yeah, and I would encourage them, but I mean, it's like totally one of those things. I would just have to leave it to them. I'm not steering the ship down that road
Yeah.
myself. I'm just, hey, if that's what you want to do, then, I've spent some time in this. I'll let you know what it's like, but I'm not steering the ship down there.
Were your parents supportive?
Yeah, I mean, like they were like, like any, I guess, parents, they have concerns about
Concerns?
like
Yeah.
with their kids like 24, 25 years old and
But I mean, as a teenager.
oh, as a teenager, yeah. Yeah. I mean, growing up in rural Georgia, I'm sure I was like kind of a weird kid at the time, or at least where I would grew up, but I mean, my mom played piano, she sings, my dad sings. Like they're
Okay,
musical
yeah.
people. So yeah, I mean that was never discouraged from, you know, playing or what I wanted to do with it.
Did you have friends whose parents were very anti? I know I did. My parents have never been against it. Like, obviously, like it's
Hmm.
in the making a career out of music is kind of in the blood. So it was never even questioned. Maybe the choice of metal was questioned, but
Right.
but the idea of music and trying to get good at it and all that was never an issue. But people I played with in high school, their parents were not encouraging whatsoever to their kids. They were very, very anti, but none of them played,
Hmm.
and they were honestly being realistic. Like that's the thing. At the time, I was thinking your parents kind of suck, but thinking back, I'm like, well, actually.
Yeah.
Actually,
Yeah.
actually, their parents were just looking out for their kids.
Yeah. 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 I mean, like, when I started playing guitar, I was like 12. So this is 95. And I feel like in my town, a lot of my friends at the time, we were all kind of, that was like not long after Nirvana and all the Seattle bands and then 95. So, there's things going on. But anyway, like a lot of my friends at the time were, yeah, we kind of like all started playing guitar. A lot of kids my age, my friends, we all, I feel like started playing guitar about the same time. So, uh, which is kind of crazy for me to think about now. And some of those friends I have are like maybe two, three of them are, yeah, they're still like in the music industry to a degree. Like they've either played in bands, they toured, they're techs, or, whatever. But but yeah, at the time, yeah, I had a lot of friends. As far as were their parents supportive, the friends that I know that kind of are still in it to a degree, like Yeah, pretty. I think their parents were, and then the other friends, I feel like even back then I could kind of tell the people that might fall off with it though, where it was like,
Yeah.
like he's into it, but he'll probably like, I don't know if this is like really what he wants to do. I feel like for me, like personally for me, like man, when I got guitar, like it was like that was it for me. I knew I dropped because I was like I played baseball, I love baseball, and but I kind of just dropped everything once guitar came for. My mom said for better or for worse. She was like, man, sometimes I wish I wouldn't have gotten you that thing, but I guess it's great that you found something that you love, and I'm 41 now, so
Did you get lessons or was it just you figuring it out back then?
it's pretty much like self-taught. There was like a guy um that came for a couple of lessons, but really me and him just ended up hanging out. Like he was like super into like Allman Brothers, and he did show me some stuff that was probably good for me to know at that point in time, but like no, it was not really. Just and even that didn't last long. And I didn't really start taking I started taking lessons actually when I was living in Chicago. I was like 26 or something. I just kind of got to a point, where I was like I need to take some lessons. There's some things I
Yeah.
need some organization here.
Yeah. I am always blown away by guitar players who have never gotten any lessons ever and
Hmm.
still ended up being good. I don't know how they did it.
Yeah. I mean,
Just playing a lot. I mean, I know how they did it, but still, it would be tough for me.
yeah, yeah. I feel like if you're the certain guitar player, I think it depends on like what kind of guitar player you are though. Like if you want to if you're into like just kind of like one thing, if like you're like Shrapnel Records era guitar player, it's type
Hmm.
stuff. Like you could probably like get pretty good at that without any lessons, maybe, you know. I
Yeah.
mean, like, look at Brandon that plays second guitar. I think Brandon's had like minimal lessons, and he's fucking great. He's fucking
Dude,
phenomenal.
that,
But
that, that dude's a prodigy.
yeah, but it's
Yeah.
like, but it's like, but I also think like I don't know, man. I don't actually. Maybe I don't know where I'm going with this. I feel like maybe like certain people need the switch turned on a little bit, and maybe like for me, I just kind of got to a point where it's like I knew stuff or whatever, but I just needed um. I feel like my ADD is like so bad. I kind of just needed like to like a older jazz guy to be like, hey man, sh steer me a little bit
Yeah.
here.
That's what it is for me. I have terrible ADD.
Hmm.
And so lessons helped give me, and I didn't always follow the lessons to a T. I know I frustrated teachers, but just to give me some sort of a target to focus on. And then I know too, like, uh, you know, getting Amel in the band, for instance,
Hmm.
like it started as him teaching me, and it was, I wanted to learn how he picks.
Right.
And he just, and so lessons after that kind of became like sit with someone who's better than me and like try to get some tips on some things like how are you like how are you actually holding your pick when you kick it into that gear, or are you are you changing the technique at all, like those types of things,
Right. Right.
that 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 I guess you don't get in standard guitar lessons.
Right.
But
Right.
I feel like that kind of stuff is really, really helpful to get from people. Like, how exactly are you crossing strings with this technique? Because
Right.
it's too fast to be able to. I can't tell by watching. I need you to explain this to me.
Yeah.
And like I've gotten lots of great techniques from doing that. From just asking people who are better, how do you do this thing?
Hmm.
Um, like I learned how to not hurt myself so much.
Hmm.
That's a big one.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think, and like, I definitely think like being with people that are really like being able to like whether you're in a band with them or just be around somebody that's like really great. It really is. I think that's a really it's a good way to like expedite.
Yes.
your whatever. Yeah, because like I feel pretty lucky in that. Yeah, like guys like Eyal, I met Eyal when I was like 18, living in Athens, or somebody like even that guy I was saying that lived in my hometown that was just much better than me at the time, or like James Malone, just like anybody, and like or like like a guy like Brandon, even currently now, just being around people that are like also that are they're like great at what they do, and it could even be, and not even necessarily guitar, piano player, it could be anything,
Hmm.
but yeah, I think like that, even being, or even if it's not like a structured like teacher or something, just being around somebody that's really great at what they do, yeah, I feel like it's a great way for anyone to sort of like expedite like sort of things you will learn or pick up, or you will get better yourself. I've always noticed that over the years.
It's kind of like things that maybe you didn't think of doing,
Hmm.
or that maybe didn't, like, you knew it was possible, but not. For me, it's like I know this thing's possible, like this type of playing, but I don't have a concept for how it's possible in the real world. And
Right.
then when I'm around someone who can do that thing, then it's like, okay, so this is how that thing is actually done, and then it forms a concept in my head that I can then, you know, make happen in real
Right. Right.
life.
Yeah. I feel like anytime you can like see someone do something like right in front of your eyes, like right in front
Hmm.
of you, and like it really like clicks a switch where it's like it can be done, and it it tells you like, no, it can be done. This guy right in front of me is doing it. Does that mean you're going to play like Paul Gilbert or something? I mean, I don't know. Maybe not. Who knows? But at least it does something for you. I truly believe that.
Yeah, totally. What kind of stuff do you work on now? Like, so I'm assuming you still play guitar
Oh
a
yeah.
lot.
Oh yeah.
Obviously, I know. Like, it's not even a question. So when you practice, what do you have a routine? Is it open ended? What is a daily practice session like for you?
Man, I don't have a routine. I never have. I'm terrible at them. But what I'll try to do is I try to keep my scope of things I learn like really small. Um, I used to not do that, but like over the last, I don't know, 5 or more years, like I just really what I practice now, I just try to practice playing changes. And that doesn't even mean like I'm not talking about necessarily jazz tunes. Like sometimes, yeah, I'll take a tune, I'll work on it for a while, but it could be like an ELO song. It could be like anything that I'm just like, oh, that's cool, you know?
Hmm.
Uh like Beatles tunes, or but just really just take some chords and just practice like voice leading them together, getting where I can kind of like hopefully inherently just kind of make cool melodies with them. And sometimes, if I do work on like I do like, since I joined Black Dahlia, obviously like I gotta like kind of start working on tech. I gotta at least keep the technique up, to a
Yep.
degree. But like I'll try to at least facilitate like, well, whatever I'm working on harmonically, I'll try to like use it all together with that technique. So if I'm playing the Beatles tune, well, let's come up with some licks with the chords that
Hmm.
go through that. Or so, but like honestly, man, like nothing, that I just try to keep my scope like really pretty small, like chord progressions, how they voice lead in each other, then connecting them chromatically, just various things like that.
And is it, when you say you try to keep the scope small, is it like small relative to what you're working on at the time? So if you're trying to get good at this one thing or these two things for the time period that you're trying to focus on that, that's what you're doing.
That's what I'm focusing on. Yeah. I put like all the focus into that. For me, like my brain works really well like in the morning. And I never would have thought I would say that. But like
Oh,
now,
me too.
yeah, get up, I drink a bunch of coffee, and man, it's like I could learn like Mandarin Chinese. Not
Yeah.
really, but like that is a good window. But yeah, no, I just try to focus on small things. It's like, I guess in a nutshell, is what I'm saying is like, there's that saying, would you rather fight a guy that practiced 1,000 kicks or just one kick over and over again? You know?
Yeah, totally.
So like I just kind of take that road because I just have less time and I'm 80 and like my ADD is so bad. Like if I don't like really try to like have a little bit of discipline with that, like I'll start practicing all sorts of things. And then at the end of the day, I'll be like, what did I do? What was I even practicing? You know? So like I just stick to a lot of times just one, two things most. So yeah, just keep my scope small.
That makes a lot of sense. Uh, I think there's a time where it's good to do a bunch of things, but I
Hmm.
think that that's when, uh, like for instance, I took a break from guitar for a while,
Hmm.
and then when I came back to it, I had to kind of get everything back.
Right.
So I had a very specific regimen where I would spend X amount of time per technique uh, building it back up. So because I don't have much time either. So if I'm only going to get an hour, how do I get everything back? Like I can't. This can't take 5 years. I need to get it all back within a few months. So doing like 5 minutes of this, 5 minutes of that, 10 minutes of this,
Hmm.
like 10 minutes of down picking, like uh, like 10 minutes of triads, like uh 5 minutes of galloping, like just all the stuff that goes into it over the course of a few months is really good for just picking up lots of things, but you don't become masterful at any of them. But it is a really good way to, I think, get ready for the studio
Yeah.
where you're going to be doing a bunch of different things, or really good for if you're in a situation like mine where you stopped playing and then you decided to play again, but like technical metal.
Hmm.
Um, but once that was done, like once I was at a place where I was kind of comfortable with everything, that no longer worked because there was a ceiling to how much progress you can make doing it like that. And
Yeah.
then I had to switch it to more like what you're talking about. Like for the next month or so, I'm gonna like be focusing on this thing or these two things,
Hmm.
and that's what my energy is going into, while also making sure that I don't like regress with the
Right.
other things.
Right. Right.
Some maintenance goes into it, but I find that that's how I would make the most progress is really just deep diving on something.
Yeah. I mean, and like I feel like a lot of guys, oh well, I mean, maybe you could say this about a lot of different musicians, but I feel like if you look at like different guitar players, I mean, you'll notice that like really most of them, like the really great guys, like they're great at like very like they're great, but like they're like specialized, like
Yes.
there's one to maybe three things that they're like really great at, and that's what they do. I feel like there's very few guys that are just like have this huge spectrum of things that they're masterful at, which is anyway, that's just a thought.
No.
Um,
Yeah. You don't hear them do. It's because you don't hear them do what they're not good at.
right, right.
That's another thing with those masterful types is they know better than to put something out that they suck at.
Hmm.
So someone, I've noticed this for a long time. Like you hear these critiques of guitar players of they can only do one thing, or that's their sound, or yeah, they're doing that thing again. It's like, well, they're the best at that
Yeah,
thing.
right. It's like that's what,
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. It's like it's like why would you not do what you're great at? You know?
yeah.
Yeah, I fully get it. And and like a lot of and I had a thought too as we were kind of like discussing that. Like some of the guys that I think kind of do cover like a broad spectrum of things, they may not be like they're usually like not the guys that like I mean, even though they are technically good, the first thing that when I think about them, I don't think of like technique. Like Jimmy Herring, for instance, one of my like
Hmm.
I discovered him through like probably Amel in like 2010. And it's like check this guy out. And that like it was like hearing Yngwie Malmsteen or something for the first time. I was like, this is a big one for me. This has profoundly changed the way
Hmm.
I think. And nothing had happened like that for me in a long time. But anyway, what I'm getting to the point is with this is that like when I think of Jimmy Herring, of course he has good technique, and I'm not saying that. But like when I think of him first and foremost, I don't think of technique. I think of like, man, this guy can like can play jazz tunes. You know, he can take these like Beatles or whatever tunes. He can do a lot of different things, and he's very good at a lot. He's like kind of like a Steve Morris or something. Even though like I know a
Hmm.
lot of us do think of technique up. You know, he's one of the. You know, Steve is like a rare guy. I feel, but like but anyway, you get what I'm saying. Like some of the guys, for me at least, that I think do a big spectrum of things very well. Even though they may have like good technique, like that's not like the first thing that like pops into my head when I think
And
about
it's
them.
usually not Olympic athlete level technique.
Exactly. Right. Right.
Yeah, I think when we think of the technique player, where that's the first thing you think, they're kind of the equivalent of an Olympic athlete.
Hmm.
And so a lot has to go into that.
Right.
You don't just maintain that. That's not. Maybe there's a freak or two out there who can just, I don't know, not work on it that much and maintain it. I don't know, but that you can't just be passive with that type of technique. Like it goes away.
It definitely does. Yeah. And I think even like the guys that are like that really have it like you know like a Ingve or like a Vinnie Moore, you know, any of these. I'm just thinking of like a lot of like or not necessarily Shrapnel Records guys, but guys of that caliber. Even those guys that definitely obviously have it where it's here, you know, they have
Hmm.
it. There's no question about it. Even those guys, I almost guarantee you would, you know, they at least have to maintain it. You know, they at least have to like play enough to maintain it. You know, it's not like they can just like, yeah, I never play guitar anymore. I just pick it up and because you would be able to tell. Because I mean, come on,
It
there
doesn't
are
maintain itself.
right,
It can't. It's
especially as you get
perishable.
older, you know, like
Yeah.
so anyway, all this to say that, you know, there's so many great people out there and it just, you know, yeah, I really, I guess it just depends on the player. It depends on like, what are they great at? What are they into? You know, if you're not into a lot of things, then of course you're not going to be great at a lot of things. You're going to be great at maybe one particular thing, but you know,
It, I've I've been trying to understand Jason Richardson for a while,
hmm
because he's kind of a freak. But I know that he takes breaks from guitar sometimes. Like he'll go like 3 weeks without playing at all,
yeah,
which to most players would be disastrous. And then he's back, and he's always getting better. So, and he's never told me how much he practices.
hmm
I've always wondered, how much does that dude practice to be able to take breaks like that and then get it back and then some
yeah,
every time.
that would be, I would be interested to hear what, yeah, because, I haven't talked to Jason in a while, but yeah, I would be interested to tell for him to hear what he tells you, what he practices too. I feel like sometimes practicing, like depending on like what it is, like if I'm like taking a chord progression, right? And I'm trying to like voice lead it, but I'm also playing an inversion for every different chord. And there's a lot of things, you know, it's a lot
Hmm.
of there's a lot of like mental capacity being used here, you know,
Yes.
like I feel like sometimes on those things, like if I spend like a good you know, a good few days and some hours of focused time. I feel like sometimes, like if I just like put the guitar down for a few days and come back, it's like a blender. You know, you're cramming all the stuff in the blender.
Hmm.
You know, but
Absolutely.
sometimes it's just too much and it won't go. But if you just let it run, you know, put it in there, focus, have a few sleeps, 2 3 days of sleeps, maybe even a week. Who knows? And then you come back, you're like, oh wow, I like somehow retained a lot of this and I feel like it's more natural, you know.
I've
Doesn't
noticed
always
that too.
yeah, doesn't always happen, but like a lot of times it does happen. More times than not it does happen. So yeah,
With technique too, I've
yeah,
noticed if I'm like really trying to like push the speed and the accuracy on something, there comes a point where my hands are starting to go.
hmm,
Like if it's been like a week or two of just like really, really pushing this thing.
right,
Yeah, like I start to feel it. Like I'm definitely injury prone. So something as I get older, I'm even more conscious of, but like start to feel that either my mind's no longer engaging, like that thing that I had at the beginning of this bout where I'm like really, really focused on this thing. No longer. Like now I'm starting to clock it in. My hands are starting to rebel. And then I put it down. And if I put it down for a few days, I come back. And then once I'm warmed up, it's like it all sank in or something.
Right, right. I know that there's yeah, I don't know, like if you read into like some of the like the neuroscience of this stuff, I forget exactly what it is, but yeah, they'll tell you like to practice, like if you want to play fast, you gotta practice fast, and you do like some repetitions, you do some bursts and stuff like that, and then you take some breaks. But I think those breaks really are key, because they always tell you in there like to take those, like, if you focus really hard for a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, well, then you need to take like these incremental breaks, which
Mm-hmm.
I really believe in that stuff. Like I
Me
really,
too.
yeah, completely. But this is a whole nother thing. But anyway, yeah, yeah, I've definitely like, I'm a nerd enough to read into some of the neuroscience of it because I just want to know why, but
Oh,
anyway.
I do you mind if we talk about this for a second? Because it's really interesting to me, and it's something that I've been thinking about a lot lately.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right, so I don't know if you're familiar with the new lead guitar player in Doth, so dude named Rafael Trujillo.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, he's kind of nuts, and his method for building speed is along those lines of bursts and the thought that you don't get fast unless you play fast.
Hmm.
So, which to a lot of people sounds like a chicken before the egg thing, because how do you play fast without building up to fast? The traditional approach is just add a BPM every single day,
Right, right.
and 5 years later you'll be fast. But his thinking and now mine is, well, your technique changes. The technique you play slow is not going to be the same. You're engaging different muscles. You have to pick differently. The economy of motion comes into it. Like it's not the same. So if you start a lick that you have to play at 240 at 100 and you just go gradually up, the way you play it at 100 is not the way you played at 240, and you need to figure out how you would actually play it at 240. And so what he does is he does these bursts where if he can only play two notes, say it's like an 8-note lick, but he can only do two perfectly in time, he'll just play the two, rest, two, rest,
Hmm.
two, rest. Then he'll add the third note,
Hmm.
rest, third note,
Yes.
rest. So I started doing that because there's some like really fast down picking on the new Doth record that was beyond my abilities. So I started doing that. I was like, well, okay, I can do three of these. So I do three, rest three, and then four. And then something happens though. It's not linear where you just add one note every time. If you do that with enough notes, like by the time you get a 4, 5, something happens where suddenly you can play the whole thing. I've noticed.
Yeah. Like everything that you just said, yes, that's exactly how I, yes, approach things like that. Yeah, for sure. There's also, I'll add to this too. There's a video on YouTube that I saw like a few years ago. It's Martin Miller, from Germany, telling one of his and Martin Miller's just incredible, picking technique. But anyway, the point is there's a YouTube video of him like telling one of his students the way, and it's essentially, I watched that and I was like, yeah, it's essentially exactly that. Yeah, it's a great watch.
Martin Miller. All right, I'm gonna look that up. So that's how you work on speed. Like,
Yeah, yeah. And I think to a degree, I've kind of always, even like back in the nitrate days, like if I had to, I think I've always kind of done stuff that way. But I just remember like when I saw or basically saw or I just kind of heard somebody else telling somebody that, I was like, yeah, that's it. That's the way I would kind of think about it. Because I noticed like a long time ago, I was like, the way that the way that your technique is when you play slow, it's not the same way as when you play fast. It's just not. you know. So I realized that like years ago, but you know how it is. It's not until like at some point you just hear or see a video of someone like explaining it to somebody, you're like, that's it. That's it. So I fully agree with that. Like
Yeah.
that's my approach to it all.
Sometimes you realize things, but don't realize that you realize
Right.
them.
Exactly.
We have a bunch of questions from listeners
Well, yeah,
for
yeah.
you.
Let's do them. Yeah.
All right, cool. I want to make sure they were very excited that you were coming on.
Sick.
Yeah. This is by Zach Safe or Saif. I don't know how to pronounce. Sorry, Zach. You know I love you, Zach, but I don't know how to pronounce your last name. So, how did it feel brushing off older Black Dahlia Murder material, and what was your approach to learning the newer stuff during your time away from the band? Do you have the same mindset and approach to the entire set, or do you approach different eras differently?
Good question. As far as a lot of the old material, the last time I was in the band, I played, well, for a lot of the older material, I was playing John Kay's parts, which honestly, this time when I came in, I had to learn all of Brian's parts because Brandon now plays all of my old parts, which is kind of a mind fuck.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because like as I was learning Brian's parts, a lot of times like subconsciously I would remember my old parts, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was like a bit of a challenge. I definitely will say that as far as learning the older solos, the John Kay solos, I definitely have put a lot, I really have put a lot of time and respect into those solos this time around. I did not respect them last time. I will be perfectly honest about that.
What changed?
I don't know, man. I just feel like I'm older and I have more patience and I just feel like I just need to respect the band's material as it is, you know.
Legacy.
Yeah, and I really try to play John's stuff pretty much note for note. Of course, I play it, you know, more maybe in my style. Maybe the technique I use isn't exactly the same, but you know, like I have to like I have to kind of play it the way I would play it. But like I really put a lot of time and effort into learning all those this time. Um, Obviously, like anything that all of my own solos, I've had to do the same thing though. Relearn a lot of them. A lot of time I play much differently now. Like so I had to reposition a lot of things on the fretboard that are honestly probably more logical the way I play them now.
Yeah.
Um and as far as learning the new stuff, um Brandon had like tabbed out a lot of the new stuff. So like I really had just had tabs. That was like pretty easy. Um Pretty easy learning that stuff for the most part.
So hold on. So Brandon plays your old solos, or are you playing your old solos?
I play all my old solos.
Okay.
I guess the only thing is like he comes in and harmonizes some stuff now that we can kind of do that sort of thing.
That's sick.
Yeah, and so I play all my old solos, and then we split up the older John Kay solos. You know, we kind of like he
Yeah.
plays some of them, I play some of them. And then on some like a song like Funeral Thirst or something, we kind of go back and forth since that's like a longer one. And and then obviously, yeah, like on the material that I'm not on with Brandon plays all his solos. Um, and then yeah, I just had to, you know, learn those as per usual. I would play the parts that Brian, you know, would normally play on those
Hmm.
songs. And then of course this new record, you know, just having to me and Brandon had already tabbed out of a lot of the songs we wrote, and then you know, Brian sent us videos, and I'm sure we'll probably tab those out too eventually. But anyway, you know, just business as usual, really learning stuff.
It's interesting though that your mental approach for the old stuff changed.
Hmm.
And that makes sense because when you came in, you were like trying to make your own name, right? Like whereas now it's more about respecting a legacy.
Yeah, and I think like when I came in the first time too, like it was really hectic. So I learned everything really quick. I had to learn everything really quick because I just came off the road with Arsis and I was almost coming right back and going right back on tour with Black Dahlia. So I kind of like I feel like I just kind of rushed learning a lot of things. Whereas this time, like I had like a lot of time. So I was like, you know what? Before I get all this stuff like stamped into my memory again, I'm just gonna really take the time
Hmm.
with it, figure out the best fingerings for everything. So I put like a lot of time and especially relearning all the old stuff for sure.
One thing that you brought up is that you play things in what would be like a more logical and efficient way.
Hmm.
Uh, and this is something I wanted to say to listeners, and people who learn songs by their favorite bands, and then we'll see them live and it'll be different than what you saw on the tabs, even if they're official tabs. And I've always thought, and I feel like people should understand, just because your favorite guitar player or your favorite band played it one way when they wrote it, or when they wrote the tabs, or on the first tour, does not mean that they're going to still play it that way 5 years or even 1 year later, because you're never going to, you don't know a song. You don't really know it until you've toured it, in my opinion. Like, until you've actually like toured it and played it over and over and over in real life under pressure, you don't really know the best way to play it. And as you do that, you discover better ways to do it. And so it's not that those tabs are wrong or anything. It's just you figure out better ways to play things over time.
Yeah. And sometimes like I make adjustments to, like, I may have played it one way, but I probably was sitting down tracking it or something. So then of course when you
Yeah.
stand up, so sometimes I have to reposition things. And some of my old solos, like a song like Carbonize and Cruciform, solo to that's probably like, it's still like 90% the way I would probably play it, but like sometimes I like revamp them a very small amount. It's
Hmm.
not so much that really probably anyone other than myself's gonna know, but like sometimes I may like, I'll change a part just slightly just because it might be easier to play, or it may even just be something that's cool. I think I'm like, this is kind of lame, but I can make this cooler much easier. But anyway, other than that though, yeah.
Awesome. This one's from Matt Paisley, which is: Ryan, as a beginning songwriter, I'm trying to write solos that are both technical and memorable. Your work with Black Dahlia Murder nails that balance. How do you approach writing solos that stand out but still fit the song's feel? And any tips for someone just starting out doing that?
Thank you. For me, man, it's been like a big playing lead guitar has been like it's been a big learning curve. I feel like it hasn't been really for me. And I mean, like, I feel like I've been able to be a lead guitar player, but like for me, I feel pretty natural doing it now. Like, I feel like I have, um, like, I feel like if I am presented a part to solo over, I can churn it out pretty quick. Like I run it through my equation is, I guess,
Hmm.
the way I would say it. But it's really, I've only kind of developed that in the past like 6 or 7 years, honestly. So actually, probably after I've been out of Black Dahlia, weirdly enough. But um, as far as like the way I approach it, I nowadays I just really want it to be memorable. I try to get out of my own way. I really want it to be. I look at the chords if I have chords to play over. Sometimes all I got is like a set of notes. If it's a set of notes, I look at those notes and I'm like, well, is this establishing, some kind of scale or harmony or what, what like
Hmm.
I really like look at what I have before me, and I just try to pull melody out of it first and foremost. Um, Earlier, I think on like some of the older Black Dahlia stuff, I wouldn't play so many notes and some of that stuff anymore. I think I could probably make something much better with fewer notes. So, in other words, in a nutshell, I just try to look at the chord progression or whatever it is I have to play over, and I try to like voice lead it together if it's chords. Sometimes it can be a challenge depending on what it is, and but ultimately I just try to pull melody out of it, some kind of melody. I want it, I want to play something that somebody's going to be able to hum. I want it to be like a little song within the song. And then sometimes, you get a part that's more like it may be over like a really fast part. And sometimes I feel like it just needs more of like a vibe. I'm not
Hmm.
saying like, Slayer solos, those are a vibe.
Oh yeah.
But sometimes, like you got to just like, sometimes it may call for more shreddy stuff and big, huge nuts vibrato or whatever and whammy bar dives. That's all a cool thing too. It's more of like a vibe. So, but yeah, I just try to like serve the song, follow the changes. Yeah, which you know, that even that's a question I feel like I get a lot when I'm teaching, and you know, it's a lot, it's hard to answer. It's a lot. There's a big answer to that question.
It it's a tough one, but what I've noticed just from watching Riffhard students is when people say that, lots of times they're mostly just practicing the technical,
Hmm.
and they're not practicing it in context. They're just practicing technique.
Right.
And and I feel like practicing playing through changes is maybe one of the best things you could possibly do. Like take a melody and play it through like a four chord progression where you alter the melody per chord, like just
Right.
something simple like that.
Hmm.
uh you know, make it an 8 chord progression, then alter the melody through those progressions and do the brain work, because it is brain work. Like, make your brain hurt trying to figure out how to play through changes. And I feel like that alone will elevate someone's ability to play
Hmm.
both technical and memorable solo.
Right.
You know, once you have figured out how to like take a melody through some changes, then maybe take one of your technique exercises. Like, I don't know, you're playing scales and thirds really fast, we'll play them through the changes,
Right. Right.
or
Right.
play arpeggios through the
Arpeggios.
changes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, like,
And yeah. Right. Right. I would say like arpeggios, even like before I knew, like nowadays, like before I knew anything, right? The one thing I did know, I knew a few arpeggios, and I could like, you know, you could hand me like a few power chords or even real chords, and like I would know how to like alter basic arpeggios through them. And that's
mhm,
really a great way. Even if they're just simple triadic arpeggios, it'll be melodic probably. You know, like that's a great way to start. Yeah, for sure. Like, but yeah, like just putting a little bit of brain work in, and right, just learning how to like kind of like connect chords with melody. You know, that
mhm,
will do like worlds, I think, for anyone getting into playing lead guitar or writing solos, you know. And then also, you know, just listen to great solos. You know, that's a
yep.
good place to start too. Just listen to great solos, see how they build them, and you know, so forth and so on.
And you can get a lot out of triads.
Hmm.
I
For
mean,
sure.
Muse is like
Oh yeah.
that whole career,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
his solos are so fucking sick. Um, and it's all just triads. It's never more than that.
Yeah, yeah.
You can. I realize they're probably talking about technical metal here, but you can go a long way with just triads
Yeah. And I
if you know
think,
how to use
yeah,
them.
they're like, you know, I look at the, yeah, right. Like, I mean, there's just so many ways to do it. And yeah, triads are great. And then once you get good at triads, and you could obviously build on them and make it even grander if you want to. I mean, sometimes like that's sometimes depending on what it is, you know, it requires a little bit more wizardry, but then sometimes like just playing triads just sounds like fucking great, you know?
Yep,
So,
totally. So, question from Franticek, which is, how do the lead guitar duties function in the band now? How do you decide the lead for the songs between yourself and Brandon? Is it based on the writer of the song or whose style fits better?
um, it's actually like a pretty natural thing. I would say for like the older stuff, since we have both played a lot of these solos, we kind of I was literally when I've rejoined the band, I was just like, hey, do you want to play this song, and this song solos? He's like, sure. I was like, okay, then I'll just take these. And then for the newer stuff, like for the new record, uh some songs, like if Brandon wrote a song, there may have been like a song that he has, like there's one track that's not out yet. And it's just got like a very simple but very memorable melodic solo. It almost reminds me of like Queen or something. And Brandon took that one because that's just what it is. So it's just like cool. So that song
Hmm.
has one solo. Um, there was that song Mammoth's Hand. I already had that written, and I already had like the solo written because it's a pretty old song. But there was like one part where I was like, yeah, I gave that one to Brandon. There's another song where the songs that I actually had to write new, I actually like went into those specifically being like, okay, I'll write a part for Brandon, you know.
Hmm.
Um, so basically, long story short, if we already had songs kind of like already written, we kind of just found a spot for each other to solo. Whereas I feel like the songs that we had to write, we sort of like made room for each other. Yeah. And then
Makes
and
sense.
then the songs Brian wrote, obviously somebody's got a solo on those. So we just kind of like Brandon may would have been like, "Hey, do you mind if I take this part?" Or I'd be, "No, it's cool." Or like some of the songs, one of the songs Brian wrote, we both solo. So like I'd be like, how about I take this part, you take this part. So I don't know, it's just really natural. We like sometimes if it's a part that I'm like, yeah, I would really like to play over this part. I already have like then Brian will just be like, go for it, you know? So just kind of
We've
just
got
depends. There's no real
no
like
rule.
fighting over it
Yeah.
or rules. It's just kind of like whatever, you know?
So several people asked basically the same question. So I'll paraphrase. How do you guys divvy up the writing among three guitar players that are awesome writers?
Um,
Because
really,
usually a band has like one awesome writer, maybe two,
right.
but all three of you know exactly what you're doing.
I mean, really, that's pretty natural too. Like whenever I joined the band, like Deflorate was pretty much already written. So like I contributed like two songs to that record. But then from Ritual on, like on Ritual, Brian was like, "How about I write about half, you write about half." Same thing on Ever Black, same thing on Abysmal. And then when I left, he did him and Brandon did the same thing. Like they would both kind of like one of them would write half, other guy would write the other half. And then on this new record, Brian was like, let's do 9 songs. We just split up in thirds. So Brandon's got three, I got three, and Brian's got three. So this is probably like the first Black Dahlia record where you hear like the full spectrum of all
Mhm.
the influences. So,
So when you know you have to write three songs,
mhm.
do you write only three or are you writing like five and then picking the best three?
I'll try to write as much as I possibly can. So, right. I will try
Yeah.
to write as many songs as I can in the time that I have, and then I will try to pick the best ones. Yeah. I don't know if the other guys do that, but personally, I do. I will just try to like write as much as I possibly can in the time that I have. And then luckily for this record, like I already had some stuff written. Um, so I didn't have to like go too crazy. Um, like if I have stuff written in the past, right, when it comes time to write a record and I feel very strongly about it because I've lived with it for a while, then I'm already pretty sold. Like I think this is good.
Hmm.
But yeah, to answer your question, I'll try to write as much as possible.
And would you bring all of that to Brian or is it you choose in advance? These are the three I'm feeling.
If there's any that I feel really strongly about, then yeah, I'll be like definitely this one or this one. And
Hmm.
then if I have other ones, then I'll fully demo them out and then I'll let all the guys hear them essentially. I'll be like, here's what I got. See what you guys think you know, is the
Yeah,
best. So,
makes sense. A question from Vitor, which is how do you use music theory when writing riffs or songs?
that's a good question. Um, Honestly, nowadays I try not to use music theory. And I'll tell you why. I feel like there was a period of time, it was when I was in the band the first time, especially like around the Abysmal era. I was like going through, I think I had just learned a lot of stuff, around because I started taking lessons I told you earlier, and like
Hmm.
26, 27. I had learned just a lot of stuff. And the thing about music theory is it's one thing to learn it, but it's a whole nother thing to actually use it. It can sometimes take time to to learn how to utilize things because
Yep.
it's like one thing to understand it, but your ears need to hear it. And until your ears hear it and can like, you really don't know how to use it until your ears hear it. That's my opinion.
I
Like,
agree.
so, um, I feel like in the time I was out of the band, a lot of stuff kind of like sunk in and, I don't know. It's like I know, yeah, of course I know, like I like music theory. I'm a nerd. I love to like talk about stuff like that. But honestly, like nowadays when I'm writing, I kind of just try to go for it. I try not to think about it so much, but but how do I use it? Okay, that's the question. But there's times when I'm like writing something, or it may be like I want to do like a key change, or um I feel like I use it in soloing a good bit, depending on what chords I have. Like sometimes like I'm like I'll think maybe kind of modally about it, or like I'll think about where I want to draw things from.
But when you're writing now, is it mostly like that sounds sick?
Yes.
Go with that.
A lot of times when I'm writing now, that's exactly what it is. And then yeah, I'll think about it a bit. I'll be like, what is this? And I'll kind of like be like, oh, that. I will figure it out, theory wise, but I don't start with theory.
You figure it out
afterward. Yes.
Does it help, then once you have the initial idea and you're going to develop it or write parts on top of it or whatever, exploit it somehow? Would theory come in then, I guess? Like,
for sure. Yeah.
That makes sense.
For sure. Like, if I had to give an example, right? Because I don't want to get too nutty with this. I just don't like nowadays, like, people should, people should learn music theory. I think it's like, I just feel like whatever you do, the more you know, the more you can do. That's my personal opinion.
Like, why not?
But why? Yeah, exactly. Why not? But I wouldn't get bogged down in theory, because like it's music, and really there are no rules. There's not rules. So I think like once you've learned it, then you just kind of learn it and then just let it be. It's there if you need it, if you want to use it. But I don't like, I just kind of go for it when I write, and I think about the theory second if I need to. But, if I have like a progression like D minor, I'm terrible with enharmonics, but D minor, like B flat, major, A major. So that's like one, flat 6, 5. I'm already kind of like thinking like what I could play over that, like I could, I'm like, well, I could probably play just harmonic minor over that. But at the same time, what I'd probably play like D melodic minor. I'd probably play B flat, Lydian dominant, and then I'd probably play A altered. Because I know theory wise what that is, but like my ear, I know at this point, because I've played that progression a lot, I know what it sounds like, So I'm not just like pulling this out like
of a textbook.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Right. Even though it probably is, I'm sure it's in a textbook, but like I know I would do that because I like the way that sounds. Right. And there are other things I could play over that. I'm just trying to give an example since it's, a theory thing, but there's other things I could have played over that, but like that's maybe what I would play over it. Maybe I wouldn't play that over it,
but there's a sound in your head that you identify as that, right? Like, so it's not that you're sitting there with a textbook mapping it out and being like, this is what would work. It's more like there's a sound that you're going for, which you actually have a name for. And that's what you're pulling for, but you're actually going for a sound.
Exactly. I'm going for a sound. Yeah, I've read the theory. I've read the textbook. I've picked my guitar up. I've played the scales over those chords. I've done the groundwork, but like at the end of the day, it's like, I just, at this point, I like the way that sounds. That's why I do it. I play that because I like the way those things I named sound over that particular situation. And that's why I would do that, maybe in a given moment, So in other words, what I'm saying is, yes, I think music theory is great. I think the more you know, the more you can do. But I think like once you get to a point with it, and I'm not talking about you got to be like some mastery music theory wizard. Once you get to a point where like, you have a collection of sounds that you like to hear, then paint with them. I doubt a painter like picks up a color theory book before he just gets to work.
No, they just understand it to a degree.
So I hope that answers that.
I've gotten questions before. One of them might have actually been from him, which is like, he really liked this part of a song and he figured out all the theory behind what I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't. I just wrote it because I thought it sounded sick. He was like, did you do this and this and this? Because like all these theoretical concepts, because like this worked with that. And it's like, no, you are way overthinking it. It just sounded sick.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. last question here, because a lot of these are kind of repetitive. Hunter Powers says, Ryan has some of the sickest vibrato and phrasing in the lead guitar playing world. What influences contributed that signature Ryan Knight style lead playing? What practice regimens are you a fan of?
Thank you. I try my best. I'm a huge Yngwie Malmsteen fan. Me and Brandon both are. Um, we both just love him. He's like our Lord and Savior.
God, he's so good.
But um, I think vibratos is very much, it's just like a singer's voice, you know? It's like something you develop it over time. And I mean, I feel like even my own vibrato is like still to a degree developing, you know, like but the more you do it, I think vibrato is one of those things like you can kind of just shake the note and go for it. That's an approach, you know? But like there's also the
Mm-hmm.
thing like, well, you think of like the pitch of it, you think of the speed of it, you think of like the time, you know, is it like eighth note vibrato, is it like triplets? You know, you can get very in depth with these things. I think like just talking about vibrato, like Brandon, our other guitar player, like man, it's like the Lord of vibrato. And
God.
and Brandon is
Yeah.
very you know, like if you listen to his vibrato, you know, you'll notice it's very like on pitch, and he definitely plays it like in time with the song, you know. But so I would just say like if for anyone trying to develop their vibrato, I mean, I would just start slow with it. I mean, of course, I like wide, aggressive vibrato to a degree. Is it, should you do that all the time? I don't know. I mean, sometimes the song may call for it, sometimes not. I don't know. Depends on what you're into. But like, I think vibrato is actually a great thing to start slow with, though, you know, just, you know, when you do it, develop slow vibrato first, because I think it helps you develop maybe control. Because sometimes I think if you have never done vibrato, it may feel a little weird. You know, it's a new technique. So you might want to start a little bit slow, really pay attention to the pitch. I say the pitch is almost like that's like guitar is just an inherently out of tune instrument, I think anyway. It's just
Oh, yes. Dude, have you ever played on an Evertune out of curiosity?
I have. And yeah,
Once you go back, you realize
yeah.
how out of tune guitar is.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like, man, it's like sometimes people are like, what's the hardest thing to do with the guitar? It's like, play the fucker in tune. That's what it is. Even if it's in tune, you know, it's like you can give somebody a perfectly tuned guitar and then they start playing and they sound out of tune. But anyway, what I'm getting to is like, yeah, just the pitch. Just like focus on like the pitch is like when you do that vibrato, is it in pitch? You know, is it in pitch or is it out of pitch? It really like vibrato really is like it's one of those techniques where like it's ear dependent, you know. I mean, most musical things are, but vibrato really, you know, like and I'm no vibrato master. I mean, I think I have like at this point a pretty good handle on it, you know, for at least what I do. But like, but yeah, I mean, that's what I would say. Listen to first and foremost, maybe listen to guys whose vibrato you like, you know, and once you establish that, then, you know, then start working on it slowly. And like I said, think about the pitch, think about the time of it. You know, is it like wow, 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 or is it wow, 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 wow? You know, think about like just how it's going over the song. You know, those are all
Absolutely.
great places to start.
And if you're a Riffhard member, we have lessons from both Wes Hauk and Miles Dimitri Baker on vibrato
Yes,
and
yes,
bending. They're really good lessons, and you know, if you're looking for a good place to start where there's some guidance, that's a good place. But Ryan, it's been a pleasure catching up. It's
yes.
been way too
Likewise.
long.
Thanks for having me on. It's been a good talk.
Yeah, anytime. And those of you listening, new Black Dahlia record, Servitude, out September 27th.
That's it. Go pick it up. Even if you don't
Yeah,
pick it up, just stream it, YouTube it, whatever you do. Check it out.
listen to it.
Yeah, listen to it.
Fucking listen to it.